Okay, today we are going to create a composite image from multiple images and text that highlights the text that is in the image so we can illustrate it. So the first thing I'm going to do is, this is the image that we're going to eventually create in the end, and it's going to be made out of an image of my text, which is my original text, the image of the hand writing that text, and then an image of a map to go along with some of the words in that text. So as we're illustrating this text that we're going to illustrate has 5 lines, and the images I chose, minus one that isn't in there yet, is to really enhance the writing that is put into this. So I'm really focusing on the I wrote part with this image of the hand and the pen and the actual text being written out. I'm looking at the need to leave with the map and making it on my own. And then the last image that will need to be added later is the get out of their shadows. And the idea is to have the image of a cast shadow from somebody, not an actual person, but just the way that shadow lays out on the ground on like a bright sunny day. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create our new image. So I'm just going to go to File and New. When it does that, it's going to open up a dialog box that allows us to create the size of our new document or our new composite image, and then make some adjustments as we get started. So the first thing I want to do is I want an image that's 24 by 36, that's poster size for what we're doing with this, and I want to do landscape instead of portrait orientation. So it's going to be 36 long and 24 high. And then the last, I can change my color mode to RGB or CMYK. I'm not going to be doing a whole lot with the levels on my photos because they're fine the way they are. If you're bringing in photos and you want to adjust the levels, you can change to RGB or CM, based on what you're going to do with it. Then my background contents. So if you look at the image that I've already made, it's pretty dark in the background and the lighter things show up. So my background color isn't white. I actually go in here and I change it to black. If I wanted to, I could go into background color, double click on this, and it'll bring up my color box, and I can change that background color to anything I want. If I want a green, I could change it to green, and that would be the background color when I brought up my new one. But I'm going to keep mine black to kind of go with the overall theme and to make that text stand out a little bit more. I'm going to change my title so I know what I'm working on, and then it'll be a little bit quicker when I go to save it. So we're going to call it I wrote. I wrote composition example, and I'm going to click and create. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull up my new platform to work with. Over on the right hand side of my layers, you'll notice it automatically has that layer, and that layer is locked, so I'm not going to move anything around. The first thing I'm going to do is I need to build up my image this way. So I can first, to kind of get spacing, I'm going to drop my map in. So when I go to my original one, I'm going to go to my image of my map, and I'm going to select the whole thing. So I'm going to choose this selection tool, and I'm going to highlight the whole thing. Then I'm going to grab my movement tool. It's going to allow me to pick that up and move it. And if I pick it up and move it and move my cursor over to the tab that is my example, I can then bring that down and then release my mouse, and it'll move my image into my artboard. Then to change the size, I'm going to hit Control T or Command T, and that's going to bring my bounding box up, which will allow me to grab it by the corners. And because I want to adjust, if I just grab it by the corner and I pull, it's gonna increase my image. And for whatever reason, this one is very pixelated. my original image is not, because my file's been copied several times. So I place my image there, and that's how I want it for now. I'm going to change, and hit enter, and it'll set it in there. I'll lose that bounding box, but you'll see it clears up that image. I'm going to change my opacity a little bit, because in my original image you'll notice the map is there, but it's not, and it's in the background, and it's readable, but we don't really want it to be the main focus of this. We really want the text to be our main focus. So going back to the one we're currently working on, I'm going to change my opacity, and I'm going to bring it way down. So the ways to do that is opacity over here. I can either pull this slider down this way, and you can see it change, or if I just hover over the word opacity, you'll see those two little arrows pop up, and that, if I click and just move left or right, that'll adjust my opacity of my image. Okay, now I have that. Now I want to put in this image over here from my photo, but you'll notice in my photo I have a full photo, and in my composition I really only have just a part of it. To do that, to pull some of that out, I want to select just a part of it, and I can do that. I can draw a box around it, and it'll give me this square selection. But if I want something a little bit more organic, what I can do is I can use my lasso tool, and what the lasso tool is going to allow me to freehand draw an area around this that I want to select. So I'm just going to start up here, and you'll see it's kind of a free form. I think I want more of the desk in this writing, so I'm going to undo that, and I'm just going to come back and I'll do it again. And if it's not perfect, that's fine. It doesn't need to be, because of what we're going to end up doing with it. So I'm going to choose the selection tool. I'm going to pull just this section out. Okay. There's some different things you can do with feathering the edges of this image before we move into that, but I'm just going to pull it as is, and I'm going to feather it in a layer on my composition. So I'm going to pull it, drag it up to my composition like I did before, bring it down onto my artboard, and you'll notice it creates a new layer. Okay, and it instantly creates that new layer. With that, I'm going to hit Control T, so I get my bounding box. I'm going to increase my size, and it's going to take up most of this corner, so I'm going to place it where I want, and then I'm going to really kind of bring it to where I want it to be. I'm going to angle it probably a little bit so that it really is a prominent feature, in this image. I still want a little bit of the hand, I want some of the writing, and I want a little bit of that desk. Okay, then I hit enter, and it'll set it in place and clear up my image. Now I want to change this to my edges. Right, so one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to hide my layer underneath that right now, just so it's a little bit easier to work with, because what you'll see is this will end up covering up this layer. We'll need to reorganize a little bit. So I'll hide that first, and then we're going to select that piece right here that we had. I'm going to select this here, and then I am going to add a gradient. And when I do this, what it's going to allow me to do is create a gradient on my edges. But right now, if you look up here, my gradient is set to go from black to white. So if I put that on here, what it's going to do is it's going to go black to white, and it's going to block out some of my image. Okay, so I want to undo that. And I want my gradient, if I click on this, I want a gradient that goes from black to clear, and that clear is represented by that checkerboard. Okay, I can pull this so that it changes my location, how big of a gradient I make. I can leave that there for now. I want full clear. My color is going to be black. So my gradient is going to go from black to clear. And I'm going to hit OK. Now it's going to allow me to take my tool here. I'm going to be able to start a line here, pull it through to here, and it'll go from black to clear. And you'll notice in my layer box, in my thumbnail in there, I go from black to clear. So it creates a gradient right there. So I've got black over here. Then I'm going to create a smaller one here. And as I do this, you can see the edges start to kind of turn black a little bit. And as I'm doing that, what that's going to do is it's going to clear those edges just a little bit. You know, I can bring it from off the side. It's going a little slow tonight. And as I continue to do this, it's going to continue to soften that edge. And I can work this all the way around and through. The other way I could do this is I could feather my image before I drag it over and then do some of this. So I'll show you how to do that now. So I'm going to get rid of this layer because I'm going to bring another layer in instead. Okay, and I go back to my image on this. All right, so now I've drawn my lasso tool around it. I'm going to get my selection tool and I'm going to get my lasso tool. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to select inverse. And then I'm going to feather. Okay, so I right clicked and then I clicked feather. The other thing I can do is I can go up to select and go modify and then pull down into my feather. And what this is going to do is this is going to be the number of pixels in and around that feather. So I probably want to go more than 5. So let's go 50. Some of this depends on the resolution of your image and how it feathers. So I'm going to hit OK. You'll notice it doesn't do anything. So initially, I'm going to, with this selection made, I'm then going to hit delete. Hit OK, and it'll cut all that other stuff out. So what I can do now then is grab my image, convert. I'm going to grab my image, and I'll see it pulls the whole image instead of just that small amount. And I'm going to bring this up into my example. I'm going to place it, resize it. So that takes up a little bit more room. Kind of get it where I want it in my image. Okay, and click that so it clears. And now I can choose my gradient tool again, making sure it goes from black to clear. And I can really start to create a gradient that really focuses on this area of the picture. Okay, and some of this is already done. I've already got that black background in there. So the part I want to leave clear is in here. So I always want to end my line for my gradient in that area. And the shorter your line, the quicker the gradient will be. This is just taking a while to process tonight. But you'll see those gradients start to appear. And one of the things I really want to do with this is I want to get rid of this hard edge that's here. That was the top of my image. So I'm really going to now kind of focus my gradient on that area, because the rest of this is pretty good in how I want it focused. Almost to the point where some parts of this hand kind of start to disappear. It can also come off the edge of my image. So it really highlights that text right there. Now, with doing that, you'll notice that my map layer has disappeared. So what I'll need to do is, because I want that as part of this image, and I blacked a lot of this out, I'm going to take my, we'll take this as, we'll call this layer handwriting. I'll rename this layer map. I mean, it's pretty clear from the thumbnail, but just to kind of keep things in general. I'm going to take my handwriting layer and I'm going to drop it down below my map. And then again, I'm going to change the opacity of my map until that handwriting really kind of starts to appear through it. Oops, I'm accidentally changing the opacity of my layer. Change the opacity of my map so that that handwriting really starts to show through, and that map is just kind of there in the background, and this really kind of pops out from behind it. Okay. So now I want to add my text. There's two ways I can do this. I can go in and I can just create text. For this, I really want to use this that I already have. So it was written out in order to take this picture. I staged the picture. So I went in and I did this before I started the video, and I selected and masked the written text. Okay, so this, I scanned it in using a scanner, and then with this photo in there, I scanned it as a JPEG. I then went and selected and masked this so that I would be able to use it. So now I'm going to choose that. I'm going to draw a selection box around it. Get my move tool, click on it. Click on it, move it, make sure I have the right layer selected, and then bring it in and drop it in like I did everything else. Again, I'll need to resize it. Everything is resizing or dropping in a little small. Sometimes it'll drop in small, sometimes it will drop in full size. It just kind of depends on how the program's working that day. And that's kind of where I want it, because I really want people to be drawn to this and kind of move through the image. And then I'll hit enter and it'll place that. And that kind of stands out because it's clear and it's white. The other thing we can do is we can manipulate text. So I'll just put in text for that. We can manipulate text and we can apply text to this. So if I go over here and I choose my type tool and I just click anywhere on my image, you'll notice two things. One, it'll put some text on there as it is, and it's just kind of gibberish. It's preset words that Photoshop and Illustrator and them use just to show what text would look like. There is a text already chosen, a font already chosen, but I'm going to make this the byline, and I will say text by P. Freilich, image design P. Freilich. Okay, and my text is in black, and on this, that's not really going to show up very well. My text is also pretty small. So I'm going to highlight this, and there's a couple different ways I can do this. You'll notice at the top it gives me my options for my text and my font that I have. In my drop down menus, it'll give me the style of that font, so if I can make it bold or italicize it, or bold italicized, I can change it there. I can also change the size of my font to a preset size. The other thing I can do is with my selection tool, if I choose that, okay, I can hit Control T. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm in here and I hit Control T. It'll put a bounding box on there, which then I can take this and I can increase the size of my text that way. Okay, and it'll increase it proportionally if I grab on the corners. If I grab just here and I drag this, or if I hit Shift and just drag it, it'll make my text taller, and it'll just change the way the box goes. But it will always increase it proportionally unless I hit Shift, and then it'll only increase it in one direction. Okay, so I'd have a little bit more control over it. I don't want this part to be very big because I really want the focus to be on the actual written word at the top and in here. So I'm going to leave this here, but I want to change my color of my font. So to do that, I'm going to double click on it. Okay. And then what it allows me to do, if I hit Command T while this is in, it'll open up this box for me. Okay, and that is my character box. Could also reach it by going through Window and choosing Character, and that'll open it up. And I can change the color of my text like we do a lot of other things. So I'm going to choose white because it'll stand out against that black background. Now what I want to do with my text is I want to create an effect. You know, if I choose, instead of scanning this, if I chose to choose a handwritten text and I wanted to create some special effects on it, I need to make sure that that layer is chosen. And you'll notice that layer in here, the description of it, rather than saying new layer, it says text, and then it'll give the actual text that you have written on the photo. And then down at the bottom of this window, the layer window, you'll see this FX. If I click on that and just click on any of these below this line here, it's going to open a dialog box, and that dialog box is going to allow me to create some different things. So if I want to bevel or emboss it so it looks like it's jumping off the page, or it's got some depth to it and it's 3D, I can change some of these sliders, and it's going to create that 3D effect so that it looks like it's coming up off the page. Or I can click on this and undo it. I can change my stroke color. Oops. Maybe I change inside. Undo this. There we go. Inside stroke color, I would like to be black. Outside stroke color, I can change the opacity of that. I can change the size. Okay. Inside. So I can highlight it like that. Or I can change my outside to white. Change my inside to black. Yeah, this is just going to create a little bit of a different effect if I really want to. Okay, and you can play around with that and how that, the center it affects different parts of this differently, and how you want to increase that. So outside moves your stroke outward. Inside will move your stroke inward. Center will center it, and it'll move both outward and inward at the same time. Okay, so if I want my, we'll do center. We'll move our stroke out just a little bit. I'm going to change this to white. Okay, and I want to change my text color. I go in here, change the color of my text to black. Okay. So now I kind of have this effect on there, and I can play with it a little bit so that it looks like it glows and things like that. So we'll just kind of back this up a little bit. Change this back to white. Go back to my effects. And I can turn these off so that I'm not messing with those at all. I can play with shadows, in an inner shadow or inner glow. Outer glow would put a glow towards the outside of it. And I'd be able to change some of that stuff. Or if I wanted to create a drop shadow, would help to have it highlighted. Select it. If I wanted to create a drop shadow, I could do that. Move it. On a black background, drop shadow doesn't really do much. And it's really kind of hard to see on there, but you can kind of see it. There it is. That my drop shadow moves. And I can move it in different directions and create some text effects that way if I want kind of this sprayed highlighted effect. I can also change my color, so that now my color is that green color, and make it glow a little bit from behind. I can also do an outer glow if I wanted to. Take that off. Choose my outer glow. Again, I would change my color. I would really play around with this and do some different things if I wanted to. I don't really want many of those effects. I'm just kind of happy with the text the way it was. So I can always hide it. And if I want to, or I can go in and I can delete some of those effects if I wanted to. So that would be manipulating text within Photoshop. There's also some different ways you can apply text. You can do it vertically. You can do it so that it masks. But with this, we're really looking for that text. If I would like a font that I do not have, one of the things your license allows you to do is you can add fonts from Typkit. So Adobe has many fonts that are available to you that aren't necessarily loaded every time, because if it loaded every font that Adobe offers, it would take a really long time to open up the program. So if there's a font that you're looking for that you can't get in here and you can't find in there, you can download it and add it to your fonts list from the Typkit area. And those fonts will appear and they'll have this little TK box. You'll notice this one has that TK box and this one. So that when I go looking for fonts, I can also filter them by the type of font that I want. So if I want one that's more handwritten, which would go with the handwriting that I have here, I can just choose handwritten, and it'll give me all my fonts that kind of have a handwritten look to them. I imported some from the Typkit. If I want a script font, I can import script fonts, and it also has a number of set script fonts that you are able to use. Right? But to find those, click on Typkit, and it's going to open the Typkit website in a browser. When you get into that, it'll allow you to sort your different fonts in different ways, and then it's pretty easy to just import those fonts once you have the program running. So in here, I can sort my fonts through my filters. So if I want a sans serif, so what a serif is, if you look at these letters closely, the edges of the letters have this little part added to them. That is called a serif. What sans serif is sans serif is without those. That's what the sans means. Sans is without. So all these fonts will be pretty straight on the edges of the letter. They won't have any of those funky little added serifs to them. You also have slab serif, which is boxier, around your script fonts, which will be script type fonts. Black letter, which will be more handwritten classic type fonts that you would associate with certain older handwriting and things like that. Mono, which are all very narrow, thin letters. Hand lettering, which all looks like it could be handwritten. And then decorative. Decorative really kind of depends on, is more for specialized things that you're doing. It should really fit with your overall thing. So if you have a certain look that you're going for, or if you're doing a promotional piece for a company that has a certain feel to it, you can go through the decorative fonts. This is like a negative space one. So you can look through those to look over different ones. You can also separate them by how you want them to appear. So if you want a really wide font, you can click on that, and then when you click on decorative, it's going to give you the ones that come in that have a wider width. If I were to unclick that and choose narrower, it's going to show me the ones that have narrower width. So if I want really narrow letters for my design, I'd choose that, and then I'd kind of go through and look through my different fonts that are narrower. If I wanted my letters to be all capitalized, I'm looking for a font that does all capitalized letters. Okay, so for my handwritten font, I chose that, and I chose hand, and then it shows me what it would look like when all the letters are capitalized. The reason I chose that is you'll notice in the design, on the handwritten part, it's all capitalized letters. So I wanted to find something that would closely match it, but maybe be a little, be slightly different, but closely match. So when I find a font that I'm looking for, I'm going to pull this off. We'll go back into decorative. We'll pull in a fun decorative font. When I'm ready to pull in a font, so I'm going to do Mason Sans. When I'm ready to pull in a font, I'm going to click Activate Font. Activate Font. And this will show you that because you have your license, it's automatically going to be installed. It's going to be installed everywhere you need it. And the Creative Cloud will have it loaded into your thing again. I'm going to choose not to show this again because I know that it's going to do this every time, and I click OK. I'm going to move this one too and activate that one. Now when I go back into here, into my image, if I want that kind of funky font that I just brought in, I can pull this. I can filter it just by the ones I selected, and they should be loaded in here. Okay, here it is, Mason Sands. All right, so if I have a certain type of image that I want to use that type of font on, I can load that up and bring that in and import it into what I'm already doing. With this, I'm going to keep that font that I originally had. I want to change my opacity just so that it doesn't stand out too much against everything else that I've got. Kind of get it to that same gray that I have these letters in. And that is my image. Okay, when I save this, I'll go to File and Save As so that I get it in the correct file that I want to save it in. And when it's completely finished, save it as a Photoshop file, and then also save a JPEG separately. Don't make your original file a JPEG in case you want to go back and adjust things. But look at what text you're working with, look at your imagery that's going to work best with that, so that your text stands out and your imagery supports your text and makes it visually appealing, and it applies to what is going on.